Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of our Cionic podcast sharing inspiring stories from the community. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Kathy Chester, who is joining me from Michigan, if I'm not mistaken, and she is the founder of Disrupted MS Disrupted, my apologies, MS
You got
Disrupted.
it.
Kathy has been living with relapsing remitting MS for 25 more or
Yeah,
less
that's
years
right. Yeah.
and has started MS Disrupted to support the MS community, people living with MS, empowering them to lead healthier lifestyles. And so, really excited today because summer is right around the corner to speak with
Yeah.
Kathy about her journey and also tips for the MS community heading into the summer to stay cool and active.
Yes.
Hello,
Thank you
Kathy.
for having me. Hello. I'm so excited to be on this with you.
Thank you so much for joining. I was wondering if maybe you could just start a little bit, maybe share a little bit of your background, your getting
Sure.
diagnosed with MS.
I was diagnosed early. So I was diagnosed first with rheumatoid. That was what I was sent it for. I was having a lot of my mother-in-law was a nurse, and the doctor she worked for was a rheumatologist. And I was having some symptoms that I never would share with anyone. And so she caught it, and she was like, let's just like go in to see my doctor. And so he caught that, but he didn't catch that MS, which was already there. Now I know and understand it was probably there in high school. They can see when
Oh,
I
wow.
got diagnosed, my lesions they were saying had been there for quite some time. And but the first thing that he saw obviously was the rheumatoid, and
Mm,
felt like it wasn't anything scary then, but just to keep an eye on it. So it wasn't as severe, but I was again having issues that I didn't want to talk about, even after the rheumatoid, that I just felt like really weren't part of that because it was just things like numbing in my legs when I would shave, but I always had a reason, I had like a pinched nerve or something like that because I was very athletic. And so I just would chalk it up to things like that. And so it was Mother's Day. It's always a holiday. I always say that we get diagnosed with these crazy things. But I woke up on Mother's Day and I could see nothing with my right eye. And I was like, okay, this is weird. So I finally went in to see the ophthalmologist. And typically, now, that I've had it so long, I've learned that an ophthalmologist is a common doctor to actually diagnose a patient with MS. And
really?
yeah, and I was so young, and he looked at me and just said, I mean, it's scary when they start getting choked up. And
Hmm.
it was like he was in my house. He said, okay, he already diagnosed the optic neuritis, and then
Uh-huh.
started asking me questions like, are you numb any place? And yeah, I'm like, I had not talked about that with anyone. And I was like, yeah, why? And he was like, well, I'm going to send you to the hospital here, and I want you to get checked out. And I'm like, for what? And he's like, I just have a feeling that you may have multiple sclerosis. And I was like, what? And I didn't know that my aunt had it yet. I just grew up knowing she was sick. And
Hmm.
I know that my grandfather had it, but I didn't know that at the time. And so I went to the hospital. They did the all exciting spinal tap, the MRI, and found that I already had that at that point over 20 lesions. So fortunately and unfortunately, they were able to diagnose the multiple sclerosis quickly, which, as you know, that diagnosis is sometimes takes forever. I didn't have to wait for that. So diagnosis was scary. I didn't know anyone who had it. And my first thing I wanted to do was get rid of it. And I just thought, I was so active, I thought, I'm just going to run it out. I'm just going to take up running and I'll run until it's gone. So that was my answer to it.
And because you were very athletic before, right?
Yeah,
And so you had this foundation of, really caring for your body and working hard to
right.
improve your fitness, right? So I can't
Yeah,
imagine that that helped.
right. Yeah. I mean, it's funny because I'm such a rule follower. And as you know, back then, with our autoimmune diseases, the first thing they said was rest. Don't take
Right.
any. We don't want you to use your energy,
Right. Yeah.
so just rest. And I was like, what? Like at that time, with my family, they had explained that my aunt had it. And I was like, she's so doing so poorly. Her health is, and I knew she was going to pass away. And I'm like, that's what they told her. That makes no sense at all. So that was the one thing I broke the rules on. I was like, absolutely not. I'm exercising. My body will atrophy. So that was the one thing I absolutely did was, start understanding I had a lot more energy then, but I started exercising right away and pretty much doing what I always did. So,
I see parallels with that in my own journey being a stroke survivor because it's another thing where, your brain is healing, whatever, so you need to rest.
right,
But at the same time, I didn't want to accept that as just like, I don't want to be bound to my wheelchair. I don't
right,
want to like just live a sedentary life. Like I've also been
right.
active. And so now, I get over 10,000 steps a day and I'm just,
Yeah,
but like I push myself that way. And I
yeah,
think it helps us when we
for
receive a
sure.
diagnosis such as this, like to be able, you know, I think it's really great to continue along in like the fitness journey.
Yes,
And I know that so since you've been diagnosed with MS like 25 years,
yeah,
you've continued with your fitness and you've even opened fitness studios and now
yeah.
you other people living with MS to
Mhm.
take charge of their own active lifestyle and fitness
Yeah,
journeys. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about that.
sure. I started with like boot camps and things like that, and then was teaching in a studio here that was just it was smaller, but it was just one of the studios that was everybody wanted to go to. It was just a really neat studio here. And I noticed that a lot of the patients, the people that came to the studio, at that time, so was diagnosed with the MS and the rheumatoid, kept kind of coming to me and asking, what did I do? And my workouts had changed, and I was learning more about, that back then there wasn't anything you could get. You couldn't go to school for this. You couldn't get certified for any of this. So, but I was learning a lot on my own. Like, what would a body do? How would you help if you were hyperextended? Like, what I was really trying to learn on my own how to help different things. And so I was getting a lot of clients that would ask me to help them. And so that kind of started that part of my introduction to working with people with autoimmune diseases. Fast forward, I then opened up my own gym and was still having these clients with autoimmune diseases and was really loving what I was doing with that. But my gym was growing and growing. And I was like, and so fast forward even more, and we're now shut down in quarantine. And for me, it was a really big deal for me to really kind of look at what was happening because a lot of people wanted a second gym. And in my heart, I really knew that's not what I wanted because that would take so much. I always kind of called it a dragon that you could not feed enough to. And I thought if a second gym, I'll never be able to work with my clients that have any autoimmune issues. And so it gave me time to kind of sit back and realize, financially, I would never make that money. But it was so heavy on my heart to do this that I shut the gym down and I started working more and more with my clients with autoimmune diseases. And it opened up because that whole world of working, as you know, on working Zoom, everybody learned that. So it allowed that opening to work with people in other states, other countries, and even have like clients that had moved open up that arena. So that is kind of how MS Disrupted began. And I also was able, I always dreamt of doing a podcast. And I didn't know what it would look like. I had, different ideas, like I'm sure when you do yours. I wanted to be very like kind of like you're having a conversation with a friend. But I didn't ever want it to be something that like if you and I had an inside joke where your audience, your people that are listening had no idea what you were talking about. I
Right.
never wanted
Yeah.
them, you know what I mean? How sometimes that can be that way. And so I really love that of interviewing patients and then doctors and then people who have invented things that we can use, that really help us. So that kind of came about as well. And it's been a very exciting journey. So I work with different patients and clients that have all sorts of different issues, where coming from strokes to MS to Lyme disease, all sorts of stuff. So it's
So
been very neat.
what would be some, like, if you have a patient come to you and wants to go through your program and they have MS, or and maybe also if they have stroke, have had a
Mm.
stroke, what kind of, like, how would you go about getting started with them? What kind of advice do you give them in terms of like taking the next level to be more active in their lives?
It's a lot of listening, as you know, first. And so the first few times, it's a lot of watching their gait, watching how where they've been and kind of how their stroke happened and where they are in that healing. Typically, it's where they've gone from physical therapy and then me kind of taking the next step with them.
Mm-hmm.
Or if they haven't had a lot of physical therapy, me kind of not wearing another, kind of going through that process before they can do the exercise time. And so really watching where they are, watching if they're in it, if they are wheelchair bound, then doing things much different. You know, a squat's not going to look like a squat if you're standing. And then realizing how much guidance they need. So if they need guidance, having a chair, something that they can, so never having a chair with wheels, obviously, if they need that
Right.
assistance where
Okay.
their hands need to be on there. So it's a lot of questions, especially if it's not with me and I'm not at their home. If it's on Zoom, my questions would look like, I need you to have something, whether it's a counter that you can put your hands on, and then behind you, I need to have a chair, something that you can, that if you're feeling like, okay, I have to sit right away, you can plop down on.
Mm-hmm.
And then if they're standing, we'll first start off with a baby squat, just so I can see, are their legs, wobbling? Are their feet forward? Things like that. So the first few times, it's a lot of listening, watching, and then moving from there. So I'd like to really see, are they connecting? I don't play music. I really want to watch and listen. That's the most important to me, is that I'm very much watching each thing they do, their form, and stuff like that. So that, do you have water? Coming into the summer, do you have a fan on? Do you have air conditioning on? Things like that, so that they're not getting overheated. We know what that's like if we get overheated. So making sure that they've got their room and they've got the things that they need right there. So that's a lot of letting them know beforehand that this is what we're going to do today. So make sure you have this, this, and this. So
I
that's a
like
big deal.
that I mean it does involve a lot more thinking and like
Mhm.
planning, but I think that's important, especially for those of us who might be have had strokes, such as myself,
Yeah,
or in the MS community. Like it's important that we
right.
think through all these steps and
Yeah,
know going into it. So I think that's a really good tip. And
yeah,
on that note, speaking of the MS community, I was wondering because I know, like I said, we are going into the summer and
yes.
it's tough when, it gets really hot out. And,
Hmm.
I wonder if you have any cooling strategies or exercises or
Definitely.
techniques that you use for
Yeah.
those living with MS for the
Yeah.
summer.
So as I'm going through, things to have ready, it's also make sure you've got a fan. Make sure, like clients in Texas or in Oklahoma, make sure that you've got something cool. I love Cold Tech is one of my favorite companies because I remember going back to, I go to REI or something like that, and I get the neck kind of bandana. However, you would put it in cold water and ice water and put it on. And if it's hot in 5 minutes, it just looks like a giant sausage, around your neck. And
Yeah.
it's dripping all over. You're soaking wet. And the technology that Coltech uses are these little like ice bag packets, and you slide them in, and I would say it lasts for like an hour at least, or a few hours. And then I always flip it over, and I'm not soaking wet. And they just stay cool for a long time. They've got several different options. And so I love the gadgets again that people make, different companies make, for us to have things that are so much different than they were years ago. Like the big, vests that we used to have to wear that look like, that were so big that looked ridiculous. And now they've got much different vests that are much slimmer.
So
And
do you
so
use, so sorry, one quick question, Kathy. Do you
yeah,
use or recommend these? What did you say those cooling packs were called?
they're from Coltech. And
From
so
Coltech.
yeah, so when you get one, they have those ice packs. packs. And if you need to get more, you can just order those on by itself. And
So would
so,
that be something like in place of a cooling vest or in
yeah,
addition?
I mean, you can do both. It depends on how high you run. And so I
Mm,
tell clients, really listen to your body. If you are a person that runs hot, you may need a lot of things, to cool you
right.
down. And I also like to give, those breaks in between, to make sure they're getting enough water. And, with us, it's going to mean I got to go take a bathroom break, and that's okay. And that's a big reason that I didn't want to go with the big franchise, is because, I want to listen. Sometimes we start, and as you well know, there may be a beginning that I see their face and they've got something going on emotionally. And we may need to take a break and say, okay, that's when I put my therapy hat on and say, what's going on? What do we need to do today? Because if that brain body connection isn't there, then we know it's not going to be a good workout because
Yeah.
their minds on something that might have just happened. And we may need to take a time and just do some breathing and some stretching. And that's okay. And I always want them to know that's absolutely okay. And so
And that's so
there's
important, and something that's like kind of hard to do sometimes too is like really taking a step back and listening to your body because we're so
yeah,
used to just like, go, 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 like, oh, I have my to-do
yeah,
list. It's got a million things, like I want to get them all done, but maybe I'm low
right,
energy and it's like, maybe it's better if I just focus on one thing,
right.
do
Yeah,
that and
absolutely. Yeah,
evaluate from there.
yeah. And it's just, I think about, if somebody's had something really emotional, what are the chances then that you're going to fall in a squat? So I think let's work on, let's talk about this, or let's do some breathing, and then we can move forward if they feel better. And if not, then we're just going to talk and, like I said, do some stretching and breathing. So I think that's really important too, and that goes back to the listening and just knowing your clients and stuff.
Definitely. I really like that tip. And I like the tip that you were saying before about the little cooling packs. I think that's
Yeah,
something that maybe a
yeah.
lot of people would like to know. Are there any other techniques that you use that you might recommend to
For
listeners?
keeping cool, I would say for me, just fast, get your wrist, forehead, neck, back of the neck with just ice cubes, like just simple things. Immediately, if I've taken my therapy dog for a walk and I get back and I know I'm overheated, first thing I'm going to do is simple. I'm going to get to cold water, ice cubes, and I'm going to take my shoes off fast, get my feet, my neck, my wrist cooled off because that's going to make me immediately feel better. And always having cold water there so you can stay hydrated. Oftentimes, if we do an exercise, our whole body is sore. And there's a couple things. It's that we're dehydrated, and also, if we
Mm,
haven't done this in a long time, our body isn't an MS thing. It's we haven't used those muscles, and our muscles are kicking back saying no. So we're having to get used to that feeling again of exercise. So that's something if we haven't experienced that lactic acid is back in. So
I feel like hydration is the answer to like literally 90% of
yes,
every problem. And I'm a person who does not drink enough
see,
water.
I
And
do.
so you're much better than me. I'm
Yeah,
not good at it, but so I'm sure I'm not the only one who maybe like
yeah,
just doesn't naturally drink a lot of water, and I
right,
have to literally remind myself, oh, you haven't even had a glass of water today. Like you should
right.
go have one. What can you recommend for someone like me who doesn't
I always
drink?
say, like, put reminders, put your alarms on. And I was born loving water. I don't know. It's just, thank God.
That's
But
good.
I have to actually stop before it's too late at night because I'm like, I'm going to pee. I have to stop. So a lot of my patients, clients that struggle with that and really have a hard time. And at night, our pain can't get up, stuff like that. I say, take that time, whether for you it's 7 p.m., 8 p.m., and stop, make sure you have that through the day. So we kind of like have a funny game where I'm like, okay, let's try to get to this and this many ounces. And that's right there. That's, if I have a client that has one glass a day, then it's okay, let's not start off at 10. Let's try to get to
Right.
3. So it's like practical wins. We're not trying to it's kind of like the thing that we talked about before. It's not trying to get to, okay, again, eating. And I'm very practical with that, where it's getting good food in, but not changing everything drastically. So if we're gonna take sugar out. Let's not take gluten, sugar, and five things out where we
Yeah,
don't
let's
even
not
know what's
cut to
working.
every single thing,
Right,
like
exactly.
one at a time.
So, right, because we know they go hand in hand, right? So we can't just exercise and not change our habits with food if our food means like McDonald's 3 times a week and then pizza and stuff like that. So we've got to work on that. And again, I just think it's really important to not make our goals here. That's just a setup to fail. And so we want to make sure that we have those wins and that we feel good about what we're doing.
I will say one thing that I have on my phone to try to help me to encourage to drink water is I have the Water Minder app. I don't know
Oh,
if you know
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So like at the top of each hour, it's like, oh, time for a
Yeah.
glass of water, whatever. So
That's great. Yeah.
I do find reminders to be helpful. So if you're someone like me who does
Yeah.
not drink nearly enough water, like you said, maybe it's going from one glass to two glasses. Like I'm
Right.
not gonna see me jump to like 100 ounces a day when like I
Right. Exactly.
drink one or two glasses, but
Yeah.
all about the
Hmm.
little wins.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's so important that we do that. And just really, as we celebrate, as people that we're working with, as we celebrate the wins, it really helps them to celebrate them. And I also give out a journal from MS Disrupted that they can, I always want them to see what bands, like let's say we're using bands or weights. I want them to
Hmm.
see, okay, today you did a 3 pound weight or you did this band. Make sure that you write it down so that in 2 months, if you've gone up in that band, that's a win. Make sure you write that down so that we can celebrate that. And so that's been a big deal that they're like, I went up in this. I'm like, see, we need to make that a win. So I love when they've done that.
I love that. I think it's so important to. I'm also a huge fan of documenting just the
Yeah,
day to day, whether that's taking photos or, if I'm doing exercise or walking, taking
right,
videos. Because then on the days when I'm feeling like, you know, that I'm not making much progress or feeling
right,
down on myself, I can look back
mm,
and see, oh, look, here's the trajectory of like I could
right.
only I could only walk 5 steps
Yeah,
years ago or something, and like now, look,
yeah,
I'm walking a mile. So
yeah. Because we forget. We forget. It's easier for us to believe the negative about us than the positive.
exactly.
So absolutely to what you're saying. It's so good to look back and say, no, I'm actually here. And so I love when they do that. Or call me or text me and say, I stood in the shower the whole time. I'm like, yes. So those are great.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's really fun to hear that. And I think, I don't know that there's anything better than that. Yes, I could own the both gyms, but I don't know that there's anything better to hear than that stuff. I don't think there's anything more amazing to get as a trainer than that.
Definitely. No, I could not agree more. I love like hearing from members of the community when they're able to achieve, even if it's just like a little
Yeah.
goal, it's still a step
Hmm.
on the way to like achieving their bigger one. So I think
Hmm.
it's really inspiring
Yeah.
and empowering to hear stories like that. Um, what else was I going to I had something else to say and it totally just swept from my mind. Um, But if to transition back to our topic from the beginning, we were talking about now it's becoming summer, it's getting hotter, and we
Yeah.
were talking about exercises for the MS community. What do you have any, like, what if I'm just looking to get started? I want to get more active in the summer. Like, where would I
Yeah.
begin? As
So
with
like
MS.
I would say a lot of times, like we'll take the summer. Like let's say I'm in the gym that I owned, okay, and I'm not having a lot of people coming in with autoimmune diseases because that can be really scary if you're going into a regular class, a gym based, like a studio based class, and you're
It
trying to
can be
keep up with people.
intimidating.
For sure, you're trying to keep up with people that are doing burpees and stuff like that. You're thinking like, ah. So I will say, like, what I do are a lot of circuits, but in a very different way.
Hmm.
So it's if they're in a seated position, like I will do, it's a lot of listening to where they're at, where they have been, and so I really try to take out any of the fear of that. With we're gonna start where you are, And then the next phase is going to be moving into a different place. And it's okay if we stay in this phase for a long time because we want to reconnect. Because in a stroke or with MS, there's been brain damage. And so we're going to reconnect, so that we can go further. And sometimes, as you know, we have to go back to go forward.
Mm,
And so sometimes it means we may have to take a couple steps back. And so as I'm watching, if they're seated, and it has to be seated, a sit and stand will be different. It may be holding onto the chair, squeezing the glutes and coming back down. And understanding that even though the fear of losing the ability to walk is huge, we can't neglect the other parts of the body for
mm,
obvious reasons. Let's say we take a tumble, which is a huge fear.
yeah.
How are we going to get back up? Well, it's not just the legs, it's the chest, it's the back. It's those big muscle groups that we can't neglect. We need to have our biceps, our triceps. So making sure that we get all of those muscles. And at the end, I do that's the only time I have the music going is I will do a cardio time. And so if they're seated, we'll do some like jabs, and then we'll do some jump jacks without the jumping. And then we'll do like three different things. And so they love that time. And, that's a huge thing because the serotonin levels are up. They're excited. And it's so good to have them leave with a big smile because they did that. And so, for those of you who don't know what a tabata is, it's not a Mexican meal, but it is 20 seconds on, 10 seconds to breathe. And I usually do 6 of those with the clients. And it's just a great way to incorporate something very healthy and then something fun. So, and that really depends on where they're at. So, starting, it is just a lot of watching, a lot of listening to see, where are their feet? Are their feet going out? Are they going in? Their legs, do they have hyperextension? Are they able to
Mhm.
stand, or is everything seated? And so kind of just hearing where they're at. What are their fears? Is it falling? Do we need to work on how to get back up? And doing a lot of that. And like I said, sometimes we may just need to not do the workout for that day and just kind of go back to where they're at as far as emotionally. So really trying to take down those fears that they have and really making it like, okay, we're going to listen. We're doing this together. So that a lot of that.
So I like what you just said. One of the biggest fears that was for me when I was first learning how to walk as a stroke survivor, and I've since talked to a lot of people in the MS community who have the same fears, like you mentioned, this fear of falling. I'm learning
Yeah.
how to walk, like I want to be independent and live on my own, but like what if I'm walking down the street and I take a spill?
Right.
I have to be
Yeah.
able to get up. So that was one of the
Yeah.
early things when I was going into PT. I told my
Uh,
PT, I need to be able to get myself up off the ground
yeah.
because I want to be independent and like, I could walk down the street and I could fall and there
Right.
might be someone to help me up.
Yeah.
So I did practice that a bunch and now thankfully I can get myself up
Yeah.
off the ground, no problem. But
Right.
what if you are someone who can't do that yet? Like how would we learn
Yeah.
how to?
And so it's funny because I had a client call me from California on his Apple Watch and said, I can't get back up. I'm like, do I get a flight? Like, what do
It's
so I
like that
really,
commercial,
it's
help,
right.
I've fallen and I
I
can't
know.
get up.
And I was like, oh my gosh. And he didn't have anyone to call. So we kind of walked through it. And I said, now you can call the police and have help. Um, what could we do? Nobody was stopping. It was crazy. So I said, are
Like he was out
you,
in public and no one
yes,
stopped to help
seriously.
him.
Yeah.
What the
No one
heck?
stopped. I know. And his scooter was right there. It was tipped
Oh my
over.
God.
I know.
Wait,
I was
what the
like,
heck?
this is the worst thing. So we really kind of used the muscles that we hadn't been training that long. But I said, okay, we're going to go on forearms. And I just kind of walked him through. You're going to pull your abs in. We're going to use the chest and back. And I
Mhm.
want you to use the scooter part so that we can get up to the feet.
To the
And then
level.
once you're there, get your phone. And then I want you to call the police so that they can come and help you. And so it's things like that because that feeling when something happens to you, you're not able to think through what do I do now because you're so afraid. So you're not really,
Mhm.
you need to talk to someone that can say things like, oh, yeah, I can call the police. Why didn't I think of that? Well, because cognitively, you're terrified and you can't think about anything. So it's kind of those things where you just really need to talk to someone that can walk you through that plan. So it really, in that situation, if you're all alone, obviously try to get a hold of the police so that they can come help you. If
Mhm.
nobody is there to help you and nobody's stopping, that's what I would say. But if people are there, I would explain the situation. And like one of my clients, I think people, we know our bodies, right? And so one of my clients is really good about, please don't bring your arm up here. It's easier for me to be down there. So again, it's that advocating for ourselves, which gets exhausting, but it's something that we have to do, especially when we're trying to get up. We need that help, but somebody could, do something that they think is helpful, but it's not helping us when we're trying to get up. So if they're assisting, I think again, it's one of those things that we have to advocate. Okay, and if you can do this for me, that will help me to get to that next step. So A, hoping someone's right there. B, trying to walk that person through it. And C, hopefully they have a phone to call the police or somebody to help them.
Mhm. Yeah, I remember like when I was learning how to get up off the floor if I fell, it's hard because I'm hemiplegic, so I can't really use my left arm as much. So I had to like essentially learn how to like pull myself up, like really just
Yeah,
using the support of my one hand, which if there's anyone else who's listening to this who's in a similar position, it is possible. Now I've definitely fallen down and I've been able to pick myself up no
right.
problem now, but it took lots of practice. Like
Yeah,
literally I would get down on all fours and I'd be like, okay, in my house and just be like, I'm gonna
right.
find a way to do this
Yeah.
and
So
practice
do
it
you
over
use a
and
lot
over.
of like core and back muscle and chest?
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
a lot of
definitely. And
glutes.
I was practicing it a lot because I knew there's going to be some time, hopefully
Yeah,
not often, but there will
right.
definitely be a time when I do probably fall down and
Yeah,
it has happened, but I
yeah,
can get myself up and
right.
yeah, it's one of those things like just training it.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing is once that happens and that fear is there, that's a huge that I always try to tell the client that takes so much of your independence away. If we don't work
Hmm.
on getting back up, that is huge because I noticed they'll stop going outside. They'll stop going places because that fear becomes huge. If we can get that fear down and practice, that's a huge thing for clients.
Ooh, so that brings up another good topic because now I'm thinking like it's coming to be summer. What if you're a person living with MS and you want to go out and be active, but maybe I'm just scared or
Yeah,
I don't know where to start. Like
yeah.
how can I get started? Um
Doing it outside.
yes.
Um, Gosh, I would
Or
say,
yeah, however you want to answer that.
um, I would say if you're gonna do an exercise in the summer, geez, go to your pool. But I would say, and we'll do it in the
Aqua
pool.
therapy.
Yeah, definitely. And I do have clients. I've had clients that do that, and I will tell them because that was actually the first thing that I did was in the pool. And
Mhm.
so, I think that's a great way. But, like we talked about, if we're in someplace like Michigan or New York, something like that, our summer is this big. And so we want to take advantage of it. And last year I did a lot of swimming in the water. And so it gave me the opportunity to just, if I got overheated, just jump in the water. But I
Right.
would say, for us, that really taking the summer off is not a good idea. But it's okay to take it down some. So if you're working out 5 days a week, which most of us don't do, but take it down some, but don't take it out because we really can't do that because for us taking all that time off really sets us back so far. And so I would say again, you want it really cool wherever you are because we can't afford that heat. And the biggest thing is the humidity. That's what really gets us.
Hmm.
And listening to the MS community, and really, I think most of autoimmune diseases, and I mean, you have to tell me, I even notice this with my stroke patients, is the heat and the humidity really gets them. But I would say staying on, keeping it very, and we can't really fool our bodies. Like we're in the air conditioning. It's really not human. Our bodies know that. And so maybe not doing your hardest workout, during the summer, doing more. I always take it a little bit slower and let's do some like normal things. So it might be like things that you think about, like, I'm going to go outside later when it's not so hot and there's going to be people around. So let's maybe do something where let's think about the pavement is not going to be even. So let's kind of make it an uneven thing. We're holding on and we're going to do kind of an uneven squat. And so just kind of more practical things that I'll do kind of like we have to reach for something and no one's there. So how do we reach the correct way without falling? Things like that. So we might do different things in the summer that's not so many big things that we're exercising, getting that movement, but also understanding that it's hot outside.
Yeah, and I feel like, at least for myself, when I was going, I'm not in any form of rehab or therapy at the moment, but when
Mm,
I was, I would often like, my family would go traveling in the summer,
yeah,
and a lot of people, I would imagine, take the summer to go to the beach or
right.
do some form of like summer traveler
Yeah,
vacation. And so might be taking time off from
yeah,
therapy or from going to workout classes. And I wonder what you would have to comment about that, because maybe if we're not doing like a formal therapy program or doing a
right.
workout class over the summer, how can we still stay active and not
Yeah.
regret?
I do a lot of times clients will ask me to give them, like let's say they're going away for the week. They'll ask me to send out like a week of workouts. So I'll give them like let's say there's going to be a pool or they're in their hotel room and they've already got the bands. So we do that in the beginning. I'll let them know. And the big thing too, I've got clients that are on disability. So they've
Mm,
only got this specific amount. So I'll send them out the bands that I'd like them to get, the equipment. And my big thing always is get this when you can. You're going to look at this list, but get what you can when you can. Don't feel that you need to run out and get all of this. And so most of them by this point already have the bands and things like that. So take
like
some of that with
resistance
you.
band?
Yeah, exactly. So exercise resistant bands, I use ones with handles, small loop bands, larger loop bands. So I'll have them take not all of that because they're, we don't want their suitcase to go way over. I'll have them take some and I'll do, a couple, I'll have them write out a couple things that aren't, because they're on vacation. And then I just have them do some of those workouts so they're not missing out, but they're getting some things done. So that's typically what clients will ask for when they're doing on their vacation.
Yeah, I mean, I think like maybe moral of the story and the thing that's important is, even, it might be summer, maybe we're taking some time off, but to just do what we
Yeah,
can to still try to remain
yeah,
active.
yeah. And it's neat. I mean, I've had clients send me videos that they're doing, from a really pretty place. They're like, I'm doing it. I'm like, awesome.
Look,
That's
I'm in
awesome.
Hawaii and I'm still doing
Yeah,
my exercise or something.
yeah. So it's really cool because it's like once they understand the importance of it, they get it. And I always say like, I can't want this more than you want it for yourself.
Hmm.
So I think that's a really big thing.
Yeah, great. This is all great feedback and great insights that you're giving us, especially just given that we're heading into these warmer months now.
Yeah,
I would imagine a lot of people will really benefit from hearing
yeah,
all that you've had to say.
yeah.
Uh, any other, I mean, I feel like we can probably wrap this up soon, but any last comments or insights or tips that you want to share?
I would say, don't give up. And that's when we give up that's when we really decline, is when we give up on things. That's when you see the biggest decline in our bodies, in our mind. Because once that, I always explain depression is a part of the disease. And depression with multiple sclerosis is it's actually one of the biggest diseases with depression. And it's sometimes we take that depression as meaning it's our fault, but it's actually one of the symptoms of multiple sclerosis. So understanding that and then, okay, what can we do for that? Well, don't give up. Just keep going. Even on those days where it feels like I just don't want to. Well, I don't wake up wanting to. But I know that this is the biggest defense that we have for all of these diseases. So if I can just do this, it makes you feel so much better after. And you know that you did it. And it's really hard to smile and do exercises and then be in a really rotten mood. It's really hard to do that. So
I
once you've
literally
done
could
it,
not agree more.
yeah. And I just think that's my biggest advice is don't quit, don't give up, and be in whether it's a group. I have, a group that are connected to each other, and they're a big part of, when they don't want to do it and they feel like they're bothering me, and they'll talk to each other and say, I just don't want to, and then after I'm so glad I did. So I think that community is important as well.
I love that you said that because I think it's so true. Like mindset is everything
Yeah,
when it comes to, whether it be recovery from a stroke or living with
right.
multiple sclerosis or whatever. Like I find, I don't wake up wanting to do exercise or go for a walk
Yeah,
or whatever either, but I find that when I do, like focusing on that helps
yeah,
elevate my mood and then I'm just like in a such better mood
absolutely.
the rest of the day, which
Yeah,
is great. So
absolutely.
do agree with your words to never give up and to keep moving forward.
Yeah.
Kathy, where can people connect with you?
They can find me at msdisrupted at gmail.com. Also at msdisrupted on any platform on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and anything like that. I think I'm on things that I don't even know I'm on. So it's
Oh
kind of
my goodness.
funny. I'll get a message from my marketing that, oh, you haven't checked this video. I'm like, where am I? So it's kind of funny, but you can find me pretty much anywhere on YouTube. So it's been really neat, and a lot of my podcasts are on YouTube as well. And I'm sure you know this. Some people
Yeah.
just sit there, they like to just see the interview and not just listen. So now the podcast is Move It or Lose It. So it's not MS Disrupted, it's called Move It or Lose It.
All
So
right. So Move It or Lose It podcast,
yeah,
MS Disrupted on all social platforms.
yeah,
Um, but thank you so much, Kathy, for joining
absolutely.
today to talk about living with MS and tactics for moving forward into the summer and staying
Yeah,
active. I'm so appreciative to have this conversation with you and looking forward to many more in the future.
absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.